Hi, my name's Daniel Brown. I'm a hypnotherapist. I'm an accredited member of the National Hypnotherapy Society, and also I'm one of the National Hypnotherapy Society's ambassadors with a focus on sexual orientation and gender identity. And I'm making this video today because coming up on March the 31st is Trans Day of Visibility, and it's an event that happens every single year on March the 31st. Now, Trans Day of Visibility is, of course, about amplifying the visibility of trans people and everybody who falls within the trans umbrella. It's about sending positive messages out there to trans people and to the wider public about trans people, about what being trans actually means, dispelling some of the myths. And it's also about highlighting the injustices, the hate, the discrimination, the prejudice that so many trans people still face. Now, because it's Trans Day of Visibility, I've decided to make this video all about being a trans affirmative therapist and how you can play a part in supporting and empowering trans people to be who they are. Now, as a therapist, you'll work with all sorts of clients coming from different backgrounds with different lived experiences, and some of the clients you may work with may happen to be from a trans community, meaning that their gender identity may not correspond with the sex that was applied to them at birth. Now, trans clients may or may not attend therapy with you due to an issue related to their gender identity. Trans people experience problems and issues just like everybody else does, just like you do, just like I do. But it's important to be mindful of the potential for trans clients' issues to be related to their identity. Now, developing an understanding of terminology and identities that are specific to the trans community, as well as an understanding of the particular issues and challenges that trans people can experience, will help you to be what's known as a trans affirmative therapist. And I really believe that that is something that all ethical therapists should aim to be. Now, unfortunately, trans people are often reluctant to seek therapy, and that may be because of a perception that the therapist will not be accepting of trans people, that they'll have judgments that will interfere with the therapeutic process, and ultimately they won't understand or be able to empathize with what their client is experiencing. So this video is going to help you to understand some of the common gender identities, as well as equip you with knowledge on the specific issues faced by the trans community, the barriers to accessing therapeutic support that trans people may face, and how you can be a trans affirmative therapist, even if you are not trans yourself. So let's talk a bit about terminology. And this is a part of working with gender diversities that a lot of therapists worry about. Is it okay to use certain words and terminology to refer to people who are trans? And it can be a challenge to know what is right and what is wrong to say, meaning that a lot of therapists simply avoid talking about it through fear of getting it incorrect, fear of offending their clients. And this, coupled with the fact that terminology can change sometimes, makes this element difficult to grasp for some people. So you may have heard the acronym LGBT or LGBT plus or LGBTQ or any number of variations on that acronym. And those acronyms refer to people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans. And trans people may or may not use such an acronym to refer to themselves. They may use a specific term or identity to refer to themselves instead. Now, it is important to note that sexual orientation and gender identity are two separate elements of who a person is. Sexual orientation relates to a person who is attracted to, so for example, somebody who's gay will be attracted to people of the same sex, and a heterosexual person will be attracted to people of the opposite sex. A pansexual person will be attracted to somebody based on their personality. Their gender doesn't matter. And a person's gender identity has no bearing on their sexual orientation. Some trans people are heterosexual, some are homosexual, some are bisexual, some are pansexual, just like everybody else. So what does trans mean? Now, trans is an umbrella term to describe people whose gender is not the same as or does not sit comfortably with the sex they were assigned at birth. Trans people may describe themselves using one or more of a wide variety of terms that may include, but are not limited to, transgender. So that's a term used to describe somebody who's assigned a sex at birth but identifies and lives as another gender. Genderqueer. That's a person who doesn't subscribe to the conventional gender distinctions, but identifies with neither, both, or a combination of male and female genders. Gender fluid. That's somebody who doesn't identify themselves as having a fixed gender. So a gender fluid person may feel a mix of both male and female genders, but may also feel more male some days, more female other days. A gender fluid person might also feel they identify with two or more genders, or that they have no gender at all. Non-binary is the next term, and non-binary is an umbrella term for a person who does not identify as only male or only female, or who might identify as both or neither. Then we have gender variant or gender non-conforming. You may have heard that term. And gender identity is how a person feels psychologically about their identity, whereas sex is the physical characteristics that determine whether someone is assigned male or female. So a gender variant or gender non-conforming person may not identify with the sex assigned to them and could express their identity in a way that doesn't conform with their physical characteristics. Now, there are many different gender identities, and it's well worth having a look, doing some research into the different gender identities that exist, or enrolling on some LGBT plus affirmative therapist training or trans affirmative therapist training, where the trainer will go into a bit more detail. Now, if you're unsure about how to refer to a trans person, there's no harm in asking them how they'd like to be referred to. Most trans people will actually appreciate that you've taken the time to understand them, to ask, and that you want to get it right. So what does a trans affirmative therapist mean? What does that mean, being a trans affirmative therapist? So it goes beyond feeling that you don't mind working with trans clients. It goes beyond saying that you have nothing against trans people and that you treat everybody in the same way. Being a trans affirmative therapist is about having an understanding of the specific issues faced by trans people, a knowledge of the barriers that exist for trans people when accessing services, including therapeutic services, and of course developing familiarity with terminology. Now, developing your knowledge in this area will boost your skills as a therapist and equip you to work more effectively with trans clients in a professional, ethical, empathetic, and congruent way, just how we should be with all of our clients. Now, there are some specific issues faced by the trans community. Hate crimes are becoming more common. Levels of discrimination and prejudice are rising year on year. Then there's other issues such as bullying, harassment, being denied services, violence, lack of acceptance, social isolation, coming to terms with and accepting their own gender identity, and also what's known as cisnormativity, and that's the assumption that everybody is cisgender. And cisgender is somebody who is not trans, basically, somebody whose gender identity matches the sex that they were assigned at birth. Now, trans-affirmative therapy focuses on client comfort in relation to their gender identity. It's about helping, supporting, and empowering clients to be authentic. And if a client feels more comfortable with you, they're more likely to open up and gain the best possible outcome from their time with you. If you think back to your training, when maybe you learn about building rapport with your clients, this definitely falls within that. Being a trans affirmative therapist means embracing trans clients' identities, and that will be a positive aspect of their therapeutic and healing process. And if you're a trans affirmative therapist, it means that you're providing a truly accessible, non-judgmental service for your clients. So while trans people may enjoy many freedoms, such as legal equality to a degree in the UK, there are many social issues, and it's really important to be familiar with those issues. So some final points from me are that all ethical therapists should seek to be transformative. Secondly, don't be afraid to learn more and immerse yourself in being a transformative therapist. You may become a better person and a better therapist as a result. Thirdly, you don't need to be trans to be a transformative therapist. Allies are important. The fourth point is that being transformative is not about accepting trans clients, it's about understanding them, the specific issues and needs of that community. And finally, being a trans affirmative therapist means you will be providing a welcoming, accessible, empowering, inclusive service, and you may actually deliver better therapy as a result. So that's all I have to say for now about being a trans affirmative therapist. And I hope that you've taken something from this video that you can apply in your practice, or maybe it sparked an interest and you feel that you'd like to do some training on being a trans affirmative therapist, or more research, or learn more about this topic. Trans Day of Visibility is incredibly important, but actually we need to raise the visibility and the voice of trans people all year round. And as a trans affirmative therapist, you can help trans people to do that. All the best.